What's up guys, my name is Sean with White Jade Productions, and today we are going to talk about 4 cameras from 4 different brands that are better than the Sony FX3. Now, the Sony FX3 is a phenomenal camera. However, it's not a camera for everybody. There are some features that other cameras have that frankly, Sony has not really equipped into their ecosystem yet. So on this list, we are gonna talk about Canon, Nikon, Lumix, and Blackmagic. If you wanna skip to that respective camera, you may use the chapters, but I suggest you watch through everything because a lot of these cameras really deserve a longer look than they're receiving, at least from what I've seen on YouTube, simply because other brands don't push their ambassadors as hard to talk about cameras as Sony does. First, I want to talk about the Canon R5 Mark II, an absolutely phenomenal camera coming in at $4,300. It shoots 12-bit 8K internal RAW. You can do a 4K Super 35 crop, of course, and has 13.6 stops of dynamic range. Again, Canon has phenomenal autofocus. I think Sony kind of is the king when it comes to autofocus. However, everybody else has caught up, and almost every brand's autofocus is usable at this point. I don't think there is a brand out there that still is using trash autofocus systems. I'm not a fan of Canon IBIS, however, they have improved on it in the R5 Mark II. However, I have heard reports it doesn't work with some lenses, so I would be a little careful when shooting on Canon. If you need that IBIS, just know that proprietary lenses are gonna be the best for that. The R5 Mark I had a lot of overheating issues, which they have solved in the R5 Mark II. B&H did an independent test for its overheating issues in the R5 Mark II, and they've learned that if you have overheating issues, it is probably due to your memory card, and you just need to get a higher quality or more heat-resistant memory card. That's pretty much all I have for the R5 Mark II. If you want to know more about this camera, please do more research. There are tons of videos on YouTube. I'm just not going to go that deep into each of these cameras. I'm just listing off some of their pros over the FX3 in this video. And by the way, if you are enjoying this video, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps out the channel and helps me to keep making videos like this and diving into other kinds of gear on YouTube. The next camera I have on this list is the Nikon Z8. Now, this camera comes in way cheaper at $3,400. So $900 cheaper than the R5 Mark II and just a few $100s cheaper than the FX3. Now, this camera also boasts 12-bit internal RAW at 8K, again, 60 frames a second full frame, and you can get 120 in 4K, which is great. Now, of course, you can shoot RAW on the Canon camera, but it is Canon RAW. Nikon gives you some options. You are able to shoot ProRes RAW or in RAW, which is nice if you want to switch it up. I've found that Nikon's new autofocus and their newer cameras are incredibly fast, very snappy, not as smooth as Sony, but it does do its job very well, and I find it works almost as good as any other brand, if not better. I'm not a big fan of the IBIS with Nikons. It's kind of snappy. However, if you can set your settings right, it actually does look pretty good. Again, nothing really beats Lumix when it comes to IBIS. However, Nikon does have that red color science. It kind of has those red LUTs nowadays, so you can pull it. So I wouldn't necessarily say red color science yet, maybe in future cameras. However, as of right now, you can get it looking real darn close, which is a huge plus. It says it has 14.2 stops of dynamic range. Nikon might be lying a little bit there. I don't know. I would say it's a little closer to 13, maybe 13.3, 13.4. I don't know that it's as high as 14.2. Maybe it is if you get your highlight roll off not looking so great, but I don't know. I can't really speak into that. I haven't done a test personally, and unfortunately there aren't a lot of tests about that out there. But moving on to a camera that does have good highlight roll-off and great dynamic range, the Lumix S5 IIX coming in at $1,900. It does shoot 6K and it shoots external B-RAW. So this is the only camera on the list that doesn't shoot internal RAW. However, I have a feeling that's changing with some upcoming Lumix rumors. It does shoot internal 6K open gate and 4K. It does 120 frames per second in 4K, which is absolutely phenomenal. Big jump from the original S5. However, this camera does not do full frame 4K 60. If you want 4K 60, you can crop into the sensor. However, you're not getting full frame 60 frames a second, which does kind of suck. However, if you're using this for more filmic reasons, more cinematic reasons, and you're not shooting things that need to be in slow motion, it is a great camera for that. You'll be absolutely fine. I'm fine with my original Lumix S5. It does everything I need, and I hardly ever need that 60 frames a second. And if I do, the crop just isn't that bad. This camera does have a rated 13.5 stops of dynamic range, only slightly better than the FX3. It's pretty negligible. Also has great highlight roll off. As I said earlier, you do get that 4K Super 35 crop. It does have anamorphic IBIS. This is the only camera brand out there that has anamorphic IBIS. So if you shoot anamorphic, the open gate on this camera and its anamorphic IBIS, which is 6.5 stops, will help you out a ton to get really, really smooth shots, especially if you're pairing it with a gimbal. The color science on this camera is very similar to the Panasonic VariCam, which is known for its great colors and commonly put beside ARRI cameras. Lumix has a great relationship with ARRI, and we'll probably see some more ARRI Lumix collabs in the future. So if you're interested in going more of the filmic route, Lumix is probably your brand. However, there is one more contender, and that's the Blackmagic Pixis, coming in at $3,000. It does do 6K open gate as well. And that's because the Blackmagic Pixis shares the same Sony manufactured sensor as the Lumix S5 IIX. So you're getting a lot of the similar readout speed, a lot of the same issues and hiccups when it comes to the sensor itself. However, the Blackmagic Pixis does have SDI, so that does really make it a cinema camera. Obviously a better battery setup. It's very riggable, it's larger. If you need that, you have it. No IBIS, I will say, but it's heavy enough that I'll be honest, you don't need it. Again, not a great readout speed. Same with the S5 IIX. It's a real slow readout speed, so as long as you're not doing sports, really doesn't matter. Has 13 stops of dynamic range. I would wager it's a little bit more. If Lumix is squeezing 13.5 clean stops out of the S5 IIX, I would seriously suspect that the Blackmagic Pixis has a little more than 13. It looks that way to me, so I will leave that up to you guys to suspect what exactly the Pixis dynamic range is. Again, no full frame 60 frames a second, but it does go up to 120 when cropped into 1080p mode. You can get 4K 60 in the sensor. But again, if you need slow motion, I would honestly go with Nikon, Canon, or Sony. Sony kind of runs the slow-mo game, but all the other cameras do it great if you don't need super duper slow-mo. All right, guys, that's all I have for this video. If there's another camera you think competes with the FX3, please leave a comment below and why you think that it actually competes, because the FX3 is a hard camera to beat, and other cameras are really only useful if you want to go to that ecosystem or you really need niche features such as anamorphic IBIS, for example. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time.